Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. We need to just let people load. Good evening and welcome to tonight's NATS chat. I'm Kari Reagan and I'm the host of these wonderful NATS chats, and I am so thrilled to welcome my colleagues Christin Coffee Rondeau, Cynthia Vaughn, and Kelli Barham tonight. And we are going to talk about independent studio business, finding them and keeping them, studio marketing, and studio retention. And it's a topic near and dear to my heart, so I'm thrilled to have all of you on to talk about this. And Cynthia, of course, this is our third chat together with you co-hosting with me and leading the conversation about independent studio business, which is so important to our NATS teachers, I feel. Cynthia, why don't you start us off a little bit with this topic tonight about marketing and student retention, and just give us a couple minutes of what you want our NATS teachers to know, broad pictures, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
That sounds great. And when you asked me to do this again for the third time, I thought the third time's the charm, but actually the first two were pretty charming too. So I really liked the format last time where it wasn't just me yakking at people, because we all have different independent studio models. So I think this is great. I know I'm going to learn from all of you. And so I would say in terms of finding students and then marketing to them, it's really, really important to think about who your ideal student is, or students, because it's so tempting to just say, I teach singing lessons, and just wait and see who responds to your ad or your flyer. And if you know who you're looking for, then that will help you figure out where to look for them. So I actually thought about this just earlier today. My ideal students are teens and adults. And among the teen students, my ideal students are choir nerds and drama geeks. And ideally, choir nerds and drama geeks who are not involved in multiple sports. Write that down. Okay. So an ideal teen student would be a new 8th or 9th grade student. And that's because if I can get them as an 8th or 9th grader before they get too busy, before they're doing the leads in the musicals, before they're in the choirs, before they're even thinking about college. If I can get them as an 8th or 9th grader, there's a good chance that I will have that student all the way until they graduate. And that would be ideal for retention. Ideally, I would like students who've had previous or current piano lessons. Again, we're talking ideal. I would like student leaders. I would like smart, academically strong, intellectually curious and creative students, and that could also involve some homeschool students, as I do have daytime available. And I also, another type of ideal teen student is an 11th or 12th grader who is just coming to me for college audition prep. For adults, my ideal adult students would be adults who are active in a church or community choir or community theater. So they already have a place that they're going to use these new improved skills. I also like having students who've never taken a singing lesson in their life, and not just because I don't have to undo previous training that might not match with what I'm doing. It's primarily because of what I like to call the genius factor. If you work with an adult student who's never had singing lessons, you teach them some really basic stuff, and they think, oh my gosh, why did no one ever tell me this? And you are an instant genius. So that's just fun. I also like to work with advanced and semi-professional singers who are new to the area. If you can sort of have the reputation of when someone who's an advanced or semi-pro singer comes to the area and they say, oh, I'm looking for an experienced voice teacher, blah, blah, blah. And you want people to be able to say, oh, you should talk to so-and-so or so-and-so. And so I would like to be one of those so-and-sos. That didn't sound right, but you know what I mean. Okay. I also, another ideal student is students who used to sing in high school or college, and they're not actively singing, but they're looking for ways to get back into their art and to sing again. And I also, another ideal student I will find through business organizations. And it's amazing how many students I've gotten through the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary. And then other students, ideal students, would be people who just want to be short-termers, working on maybe preparing a solo for their sister's wedding, or a band singer who just wants to learn how to sing so they don't lose their voice by the end of the gig, and then short-term audition prep. So I kind of like having those little short-termers in there, but those others are my ideals.
What's so important, what you just revealed that people may not know, for people like you and I have been teaching for 35 plus years, right? Right? You are able to really, with great specificity, know who you want to attract to your studio. And I know we're going to unpack that a little bit as we go tonight, but I think that's really important to put out into the universe your vision, because voice studios can look so differently. My private independent studio looks so different than it did 10 years ago and 20 years ago. It's evolved for me in a way that works for me now. Right. And it, yeah, so the individuality of that's so important. So Christin, let's take it over to you and tell us a little bit about just kind of a 2-minute blog about marketing and retention.
Yeah, well, I love all of Cynthia's thoughts about finding your ideal client. That's such a big part of it. I think taking it down to like a foundational level, as independent voice teachers, we have to acknowledge that we are business owners and that we are business people. As artists and as very generous of spirit people, sometimes that makes us feel uncomfortable and yucky, because we all have different mindsets around money and business and making money and that sort of thing. So first and foremost, owning we are business people and we have to run our businesses well so that we can serve our clients well. I think that's step one. Step two is understanding that marketing is different from advertising. I know Cynthia reads a lot of Seth Godin, and I do too.
That's my guy.
So the idea that marketing is the story that we tell. Every studio tells a story. Every teacher tells a story. We are all seeking to figure out what is our client or our student's problem, and how do we serve them? How do we help them solve their problem? It's our job. I actually came across this Seth Godin quote today that I love. He says, the marketer's job is to tell a true story that resonates. We all love the word resonate. That matters to people, and then repeat it often enough that it creates value. And then another Godin quote that I love, he says, the biggest challenge is to stop acting like a marketer and start acting like a human. It's empathy. It's creating connection. Exactly what Cynthia was saying. Figure out, what do these prospective clients want? How do we meet them there? How do we solve their problem? I think the third thing for independent studio owners is to ask some soul-searching questions. Why do we do what we do? How do we feel about what we do? And who do we want to serve? Exactly that idea of finding that ideal client. What do we want people to gain from working with us? And how do we want them to gain this information? How do we want to convey them? Do we want a very top-down model of, you know, I am the teacher, you are the student, you will do everything I say? Do we want a more egalitarian, collaborative model? This will be dependent on your ideal client, and your ideal student, and your personality, and your studio demographics, and all that. Some thoughts on retention, just throwing it all out there. People want to be where they feel valued, where they feel wanted, where they feel safe, where they feel accepted, where they feel heard and understood. Again, this looks different in every studio and for every client, because everyone's goals are different. But we have to know who our ideal client is so that we can attract them. And we have to know who our ideal client is so that we can serve them. When those people find us and when we find them, if we serve them with respect and if we serve them with dignity, they know they are home. Retention does not become a problem because they found their place. They found their safe space. They found that they are where they are welcomed and wanted.
Seth Godin would call it the tribe. They found their tribe.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You know, whether we like it or not, we are a service-based industry. The biggest commodity that we trade in is how we make our clients/students feel. And if we make them feel small and stupid, we will not keep them. If we make them feel loved and valued and treasured and respected, the retention takes care of itself, I believe.
Well, and you hit on also an important point that I will unpack a little bit, that idea that we're business owners, but we have to bridge that line to being empathetic humans as well. And that it can sometimes in our business, it's a tricky line to draw, and a necessary line to draw in a multitude of ways. So I'll be eager to chat about that idea some more as well. Oh, who was the name that you referred right at the beginning, Christin?
Oh, Seth Godin. He has a blog. He's written, you know, Linchpin. He's written a gajillion books.
Okay.
Godin is the last name. Seth Godin.
I missed it, and I bet other people did as well. Well, Kelli, that leads us to you. You're in Eastern Washington, as well as Cynthia is, but I know you're more close to Pullman. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm actually right on the border. So I teach in Moscow, Idaho, but most of my students do come from Pullman. So
okay. 3 Washingtonians on tonight. Woohoo!
Yes, yes.
I love this. So tell us a little bit about, just again, broad strokes right now about marketing retention for independent studios.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with everything that Christin and Cynthia have said before, that as far as finding your ideal client and knowing what that is, and finding those people using an empathetic voice, right? And most of my students come to me by word of mouth, and I don't actually do a lot of marketing. I have a very close relationship with the local choir director and university teachers here. And so I can actually chat with them most of the time that someone connects with me, and I can talk to them about the person who's looking to come into my studio. I am involved with local theater, and that helps me find people who want to do performing on an amateur level. Being involved with the choir director, it helps me to know what his students are working on and how I can help serve the local music program. So it's not really even just about my studio, it's about our whole community of musicians here on our small area. And I found with many of my students that the community is what they're seeking when they come into my studio specifically. And so that has become sort of my marketing strategy is I'm now looking for students who are more looking for community-based musicianship. And we do studio classes and go support each other's performances. We put each other on Facebook all the time and comment. We use social media quite a bit. And that has been really successful. Once I started showcasing the community using social media, I ended up having an influx of inquiries to join the studio. And so that was a really interesting thing that I didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love it.
I would love
students, that's kind of how I go for it.
I have to say, I want to be in Kelli's studio. She has done such an amazing, I've never been to Moscow, Idaho. I don't know anything about it, but I tell you what, just from her presence on social media and how she champions her students, you feel like you're part of the team. You feel like you are part of that community. And she is so good about, exactly what she said, like showcasing their hard work, giving them opportunities to collaborate with one another. Sometimes she'll do like a Facebook Live of her studio classes, and you just see this beautiful esprit de corps that they have together. And Kelli could do a whole masterclass just in building studio community. It's amazing.
Oh,
and by social media presence, are you, expand on that a little? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram?
Yeah. It's a lot Facebook. So just last spring, we had a senior showcase, and so I interviewed my seniors individually on Facebook, sort of saying a little something they were going to do for their performance, and it was very well received. And so some of the social media stuff is actually a little beyond me. So this year I hired my teenage students to be my social media person. And just last weekend, or just yesterday, we were at our local NATS adjudications, and she was posting from there, sharing,
And
this
one of your students won or placed.
one of my students got third in the upper tier musical theater, which was exciting. So I do have my social media expert within my studio who posts a lot, and then sometimes we just, if someone's having a great lesson and they're feeling good, I'll be like, hey, let's just throw this on live. Let's share what you're doing. And so we have a private voice studio group, and then we have a public Facebook page. We use both of those. And then we do have an Instagram, but I'll be honest, I don't know anything about that. It's all my student who takes care of that. So
well, that's great. I love that. I want to remind people that are on tonight that this is your NATS chat. So please be sure, and you can type a question and I will see it. Nobody else sees it, but I see it, and then I can ask my guests on behalf of you. So please feel free to ask questions. I'm getting little side chats with Michelle Marquardt and Shannon Coates saying, yes, they love you all, and get the students marketing now. And yes, so you're getting lots of accolades from those two fabulous women.
Oh, we love you, Michelle and Shannon.
And I also want to mention that for people watching this, that they can go to your websites. Christin, yours is sanddollarmusicteacher.com. Is that correct?
Just $10
music. And Cynthia is Magnolia Music Studio in Richland, Washington. And is the Colorado one still open, Cynthia?
Yes, Amy Woods is the director of the Northern Colorado studio, and she started out as a teacher in my multi-teacher studio, and a few years after I moved out to Washington, or a couple of years later, she actually took over as the director of the studio there, and now she is actually the owner and director of Magnolia Music Studio NOCO, Northern Colorado, and I'm the owner and director of the one here in Washington, but we share a website. So when you go to the website, you click either Tri-Cities, Washington, or Northern Colorado. And it just makes sense. I was already paying for the website. We already had the logo and the branding. So that's continued to work very well.
And Kelli, yours is Kelli Barham Voice Studio.
It is currently under construction. So Facebook's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay. And we have a question for you, Kelli, from Nancy Walker, who says she's also a community-based voice teacher, and she's curious if you use Nextdoor as a local resource.
I don't. I'm unfamiliar with that one.
Oh, Nextdoor. Oh, a lot of people use it as a neighborhood posting of anything from my dog is lost to who's a good sitter. And I know voice teachers are using it more and more. Christin or Cynthia, maybe you want to speak to that?
I would say it's not for me. Someone had signed me up for it, and I didn't ask to be signed up for it, and it took a little while to get unsigned up, but I found it mostly, and maybe it's just my neighborhood and the folks that live around here, but I mostly saw things for lost pets, which is great, but then complaining about the garbage didn't get picked up on this day, and is anybody having this problem, and it really was not helpful for me. So good luck to you if it is.
And Michelle types, Nextdoor is great, but you have to get a biz account, and it can be precarious, so I'll just add that. So we have another question. Let's talk a little bit about voice studio classwork or voice class. How do each of you offer that, and how does that work?
Well, I can speak to mine. So my studio classes are run sort of it's a very, very casual performance class. So it gives the students an opportunity to learn some performance etiquette, some audience etiquette, very low pressure opportunities to practice their songs. And then they also build camaraderie. You know, we do warm-ups together. We play games together. We've this last Halloween, we did the Songbird warm-up games from the Full Voice. And we of course always have food because that's how I get them to come back. So we usually will have, you know, different teas and cocos, and sometimes they have different themes. So for example, 2 weeks ago, we had a studio class that was prepping for NATS. The week before that, it was Halloween. And then usually after NATS, we just do a karaoke party because everyone's exhausted and tired from audition season. So we just kind of play, and it just gives them an opportunity to sort of find that balance between what is it to pursue this skill and this technique, and what is it to enjoy it and play and still honor what music is, which, you know, is just this fun thing that we do.
I had a list of things under keeping students under student retention, and that's where I actually included to create opportunities and added value. And that's where I put things like competitions, like NATS and MPNA, workshops, and the kind of performance classes, group classes that Kelli is talking about. I personally don't charge extra to my students who are currently taking lessons, you know, paying tuition for lessons. When I have a studio class, a performance class, they do not pay extra to attend that, and I pay the accompanist. So it's an added value. And if I could throw one more thing in there under keeping students and retention, and this has to do with teen students in particular. And it seems very counterintuitive, but one of the ways that I have student retention with teens is I broke down, don't be very flexible with conflicts, because you will go crazy trying to reschedule around sports and rehearsals, and you're jumping through all of these hoops, and you know what, that's the student that you're going to lose anyway, because they are overscheduled, they are over busy. And I find that if I'm very inflexible with teen student conflicts, what I end up with is the students that will figure out how to do all of those other things and prioritize their singing lesson. So like I said, it sounds counterintuitive. And to retain adult students, I do exactly the opposite. I am actually pretty darn flexible, you know, within studio policy with my adults. And if someone's going on a vacation or they have a business trip, I will say, you know, let's do an hour lesson next week instead of 2 half an hours. And so that's just a couple strategies there.
Love it.
I would love to piggyback on Cynthia's comment there, to encourage people to consider that it's okay to lose students. That we tend to feel like, oh no, if my studio is not bursting at the seams, I'm failing. If a student is not right for our studio, that's okay. We need to let them go so that we can create space for the student who is right for our studio. So, you know, the overscheduled teams that Cynthia's talking about, if lessons aren't a priority for them, we can wish them well and release them, right, to go do the next thing, because you never know who's on the other side of that. What student is on the wait list who is going to be the perfect fit and who's going to work really hard. The more rigid we can be in our idea of our ideal client, the more clear we can be in how we communicate. And when it's time to give grace to people, we can do that. But if we have clear expectations, then we set everyone up for success.
So let's back up a couple steps from retention, a little bit to the marketing. There's a couple questions, but even before we get to the marketing, I want to back up one more step to the ideal client that Cynthia started this chat with tonight. I think in this day and age, it's so different than when I started out as a voice teacher. We mostly taught the high school, some middle school who were in the school choir. They were getting ready for solo ensemble, and it was a classically based teaching technique. But now anything goes, and we could talk on and on about the multitude of facets around singing that voice teachers are expected to be experts on now. It's ridiculous, right? So everyone really, we need to pick some lanes that work for us. And I think that then helps us to choose the ideal student, right? And whatever that ideal means to you, whatever expertise you have as a teacher. So once you know that part, Kristen, that leads to your comment about marketing and advertising are two different things, right? That marketing is the story. So would you let's talk a little bit about that, because we're getting some questions about how do we, if we're in a new location, how do we get started, right? And Cynthia in particular, there's a question to you about the Chamber of Commerce and Rotary Club. So but Kristen, why don't you lead us first in your idea?
Sure. Sure. Well, one thing that I would invite people to consider is what we know how to teach might not be what people want. And so we do have to have this idea of our ideal client, but we also have to be willing to grow our skill sets, because I tell you what, I want to teach art song. Nobody in my studio wants art song. They want to know how to belt. So I had to learn how to teach belt. And turns out I love it and I love them. So it's interesting. Sometimes style and genre inform the ideal client. Other times it's personality and work ethic and goals. So I don't know. But as far as how do we find these people, I think it varies according to your community. We're an Air Force family, so we move all the time. And so I have to continually evolve my studio. The things that I found that work are getting in schools, getting in churches, doing free workshops, offering as much value as I can for free to communities, joining local music teachers associations, befriending music teachers as much as I possibly can, be they independent studio teachers or classroom teachers, either way. When we can develop collegiality in our circle, people are much more willing to refer out to us. And so when I've moved to new places, I'll book lessons with local piano teachers, or, I'll go to voice teachers and coaches to get coachings for myself and let them know, here's where I am, here's who I am. If you've got an overflow, I would love to help. If you need a sub, I would love to sub for you sometime. Networking amongst teachers, I think, is a big, big way to find students.
Mm-hmm.
I swear you looked up my list. Yeah,
Oh!
I'm sitting here nodding and nodding. And you mentioned Music Teachers Association. I also have moved a lot. And in each city where I started up a new studio, I joined the local chapter of Music Teachers National Association, MTNA. And a lot of voice teachers would say, well, why do you join MTNA? It's mostly piano teachers. And the reason is because it's mostly piano teachers. And when those teachers are asked, hey, can you recommend a flute teacher, or can you recommend a voice teacher, they are really likely to recommend someone who's already a part of their organization. So there are, I think about 5 wonderful voice teachers in our local MTNA chapter, and many, 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 dozens and dozens of piano teachers. And those piano teachers will refer students to us.
Absolutely. Well, because a lot of times piano teachers end up in this position where they're asked to teach voice, and they don't feel competent doing that, but they don't know, who's a voice teacher to refer out to. So.
And I use those MTNA teachers also as collaborative pianists. So
totally.
It's nice.
Totally.
Kelli, did you want to add anything?
I'm actually completely on the flip side of both Kristen and Cynthia. I teach 30 miles from where I grew up and 6 miles from where I went to college. So I still have a great relationship with my professors from when I was at WSU. And so oftentimes, really serious music students will contact the universities, and they want to, they want to study with university teachers, but many university teachers don't have the luxury of having an independent studio. Well, to me, it's a luxury. I think my job's
I love that you framed it like that, Kelli. I was
the honor.
But because I have this relationship with them, and they know me, and they know my teaching style, because much of it was influenced by them, they're real quick to send people my way. And same with the high school teachers. I've been here for a really long time and I'm established. And because I'm a university, well, 2 university town, it's a really transient community. So one of the things that does attract people to my studio is that I'm permanent. I've been here for 15 years and they know I'm not going anywhere, and that's not the case with probably 50% of our population.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I think, I mean, the obvious when you first get into a new community, if you're building a new studio, definitely the contact with the local high school teachers and junior high, if you choose, and if you don't mind the elementary school teachers. And I think I don't teach that age level anymore, but I have lots of teachers who study with me, and they're always asking about this, and that they will report back to me. We're in a big city here, right? That they don't get a response from the teachers. So it takes time. I say offer to come in and give a free master class, offer to come in and just talk to the students, take your flyers or your business cards or whatever you use. But around here in a bigger city, I think it may take longer to establish those relationships, but once they're established. But also I think the church choirs is another terrific place to make connections.
Community choruses.
Say that again, Cynthia.
Community choruses.
Community chorus, correct.
Community chorus.
Yeah. And Cynthia, since you're on, let me ask you a couple. Somebody wants to know specifically how you've gotten students from the Chamber of Commerce and Rotary Club. And hang on, one other. Cynthia, are you getting much return from your membership in your local COC? I joined last year and the cost was quite high. So this person says they don't believe that they acquired any students.
I do, and it's because of building relationships. So that last year when I was asked to actually be on the board of the local Chamber of Commerce, it's because they wanted someone on the board who could represent the arts. And so I'm like the arts person. And when we have Chamber of Commerce board meetings, I'm the one who will always eventually raise my hand and say, how are the arts included in this project, whatever it is? And I'm building relationships with business people so that when they are looking for recreational music lessons for themselves, or sometimes it's for a child or a grandchild, they know me as a professional. So they know there's a trust factor there. And they know hopefully they know I'm not a charlatan, and I know what I'm doing. And I think it's just because they know me at that level of professionalism, and as a business owner, they feel comfortable recommending me or coming and taking lessons themselves. And I think the same thing is true with Rotary Club. I mean, it has nothing to do with music, but they know me, and I've established these relationships. So just this past week, I started a new adult student, and I met her through Rotary.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Somebody is asking, how do you approach churches if you don't belong? I was the one talking about churches, but I would say this: if you're absolutely brand new in a community, it might be worth several Sundays of attending, depending on how big of a community you live in, attending the different churches and assessing a little bit about who has what type of choirs within their church. Oftentimes the larger churches have an adult choir, a middle school choir, a high school choir, right? All different types that you could then use as networking opportunities. And so you could introduce yourself. I think face-to-face is always good. But I think otherwise, email is a fine contact. Do you guys have any thoughts on that with the churches specifically?
Yeah, sorry, my cat is gonna yell until I pick him up. Hi, say hi to Nats, Joey. When we moved to New Mexico, one of the very first things I did, this was 2007, I think, I just sent a bunch of letters to every music minister in the town and just said, hi, I'm new here. I'm fresh out of undergrad. I would love to get experience working with choirs. May I come do a workshop? May I, come sub for you someday? Like, how can I be of use to you? And I think I sent 30, and I got one response. And this one choir director directed at a church literally a mile from my house. And she asked me to come do a free workshop, and I did. And I met the most amazing people, and their pianist, who is now a dear, dear friend. And she ended up referring a lot of students to me. She helped me find a voice teacher there. And I ended up being able to do a lot of work with that choir and get a lot of students through that one connection. So it might take sending out 30 letters and getting one response, but that one response totally paid off.
And do you have an opinion about emails versus snail mail?
Yeah, this was back in the dark ages 10 years ago. I think now probably email would be fine.
One top-down strategy, I just before we move away from connecting with the school teachers, one top-down strategy that's worked really well is if you get invited to be a festival judge. And that may be, if you're new to town, maybe might be sending those letters. In my case, it was sort of word of mouth, and some of the other local arts people like Justin Raffa and Reg Unterseher had recommended me. And once you're a music festival adjudicator, either at the high school or the middle school level, you have dozens and dozens of teenagers coming in and singing for you. And they remember you. I mean, I will say this, I never, ever, ever actively recruit for my studio. When I'm hired as an adjudicator, in fact, if people ask for my business card, I won't give it to them. If I'm at the festival, I will give them my website and say, I'd be happy to, talk to you, check out the website. But having said that, it really is a wonderful opportunity to work with a lot of teenagers, and I know that some of them who've contacted me, a parent will say, oh, you adjudicated my child, and I just love how positive you were, and yeah. And once you get invited to be a festival adjudicator, you will be invited back, and they'll refer you to out-of-town school districts, and it's kind of a fun thing.
And it goes without saying, joining your local NATS chapter, because most of them now have websites that list all the voice teachers and the types of genres that they teach in the area, again, in a big city like Seattle, the area that they live in, and then a link to their websites. Kelli, I see you nodding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Cynthia, somebody asked, you mentioned semi-professionals were also your ideal clients. How have you marketed to that type of student specifically?
I have not. That has strictly been word of mouth. And I've had people contact me saying they're moving to the area, and honestly, they know me through NATS. They know me through NATS and through being an associate editor with Internos, or they've met me at conferences, or I've met them previously, or someone who met me previously has recommended, said, oh, Cynthia's in Eastern Washington, get a hold of her. And
you have a story. I mean, Cynthia now lives in my hometown where I grew up. And so you have so integrated in these not very many years yourself into the community. So
4 years.
Yeah, and you have that beautiful storefront right on Jiwash Way, right? That people see Magnolia Studios, music studios in a multi-teacher environment. So that helps a lot. Different, probably, Kelli. I assume, do you teach out of your home potentially? Yeah. So same thing. Word of mouth is where you begin.
Yeah, and in fact, for me, I mean, the marketing and the retention are just kind of one and the same for me. I mean, my marketing is my retention. Students stay because they feel valued. They like the sense of community, and then they're my biggest ambassadors. Everyone who I have in my studio now got my name from somebody who was in my studio.
Now,
so
your
it's just
are your students who are out there performing.
I what?
Your ambassadors are your students who are out there performing and getting the leads in the musicals and in the top choirs and going to Allstate, and people, I want to study with your teacher.
But But I think even, even the ones who just have no desire to perform, the ones who are not seeing that, they're getting the leads, that they're getting selected for All-State Choir, the people who are seeing that, oh my gosh, they love being in your studio. They're in your studio and they love singing and they're happy to come to you every week. Right there, that's your marketing and your retention.
And I have to just say, Kelli, as an aside, I am the lucky recipient of one of your wonderful students, Will, who's now
Yes.
studying with me at the University of Washington, and I'm sure enjoying working with him. I'm sure you miss him terribly.
I do. No, we're still in touch, and he tells me all the time how much he's loving his lessons. So
Well, that's very kind. He's
I'm
wonderful.
happy to pass him along to another wonderful teacher.
Well, keep sending more to us. I love that. We digress. Sorry, everyone. Someone's asked a really important question about thoughts on teaching at home versus renting a studio in a larger city like LA or New York. And that's an interesting topic. Who wants to tackle that?
So that's a challenge. I think first and foremost, if you're in an urban environment, it depends on where you live. If you're in an apartment or a condo type situation versus a house. When I lived in California, I did teach out of my home, but the city ordinances were such that I had to get a business license to teach out of my home. I assume that's different everywhere. I don't know. But whatever you do, of course, take precautions to be legal and considerate of your neighbors. But then in terms of just cost and overhead, so I teach out of my home, like Kelli, and I'm really grateful for it. For me, in my situation, it's ideal because I have a 30-second commute and I can still be home in time for my kids' bedtime. And and there's no overhead. I don't have to, all of, studio income goes back into the studio rather than having to pay rent on something. But there is always that thought of, what if we expanded? What if we hired other teachers? And yeah. I think a lot of it just has to do with each individual studio's needs and goals, and what is the feel that you want your studio to have.
The 20 years that I taught singing lessons, I absolutely taught out of my home. And when we would move to a new place, as we looked at houses, I looked for a space that does it have a separate entrance, ideally, or and it was great. But I found that the older I got, and taught private studio for my home, taught university for a while, and when I left academia to teach independently again, I had a very strong sense of wanting to keep my home life separate from my business life. And for me personally, I really love that. Now, right now, I'm at the studio, but when I'm done, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to my house. And I really like that I'm not teaching lessons in my house.
I wonder if a lot of it is a seasons of life thing,
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's so exciting about our business is that you can design it in so many different ways that work for you. Something changes in your life and you need to only be teaching 20 students a week. You have more flexibility in time and you can up that, right? There is, as much as there are challenges as being an independent studio owner, there are also many gifts and blessings in that, I think. And you just have to decide what works for you. Thank you, Shannon and Michelle. Has somebody, Carolyn Smith is asking, has anyone had success with Alignable website? I don't know what that is. So
I'm on Alignable. I haven't gotten any students from it yet, but it's trying to be like your local neighborhood LinkedIn. So it is just for local businesses.
Okay.
And mostly I've had real estate agents and marketing people who want to, to align. In fact, even the name is kind of funny. Instead of LinkedIn, it's like Alignable. So I haven't had a negative experience with it like I did with Nextdoor. So it's there, I'm there, not much is happening.
Okay. Kelly, any experience with it? No. And then now we're being asked about Thumbtack. There's lots of, well, somebody needs to write an article on all these different and give kind of an overview. So there you go, an independent teacher who has time to write that type of article.
And submit it to me for Internos Independent Voices.
Oh, love that.
Yeah, I haven't updated that reminds me, I haven't updated my Thumbtack profile since I moved to Washington. I should probably do that, and then I'll report back to you.
How do you use it, Cynthia? What is Thumbtack for people who don't know?
Thumbtack is a site for where people are looking for services primarily. So if you're looking for a house painter, or you're looking for a guitar teacher, or you're looking, for a house cleaner, for a variety of things, if you go on Thumbtack, then you can enter your city, and it will give you. It used to list all of the providers in your area, which actually was much better for the business owner. Now you have to actually pay to actually, I'll get an email saying so-and-so is looking for voice lessons, and then I have to determine whether it's worth it to me to spend 2 credits to actually follow up with that person. The old format, I actually did get a few voice students from. The way that they do it currently, I have not gotten any students from Thumbtack in a while, but I know some teachers that have.
Yeah, Brooke McNamara, I'm so sorry, Brooke, says that she uses it and it's great. So
hey, great.
There's a thumbs up for Thumbtack.
Hey. And hello, I know her.
Lacey is asking, do you use promotions to increase student engagement?
What kinds of promotions, like coupons or?
Yeah, I would imagine she's. Do you use promotions, discounts? Thank you, Lacey. Discounts, Facebook promos. No. Actually, that wasn't from Lacey, but
yeah.
Michelle piped in with that one.
I do program ads. I will attend quite often. I can't make it to everything, but I try to attend my students' performances, whether it's with the community chorus or the high schoolers doing choir concerts and plays or community theater. And as the budget allows, I will do a program ad. And that I find is very effective because it's visibility. I mean, if people can open the program and oh, there's that Magnolia logo again. And I feel like even if I don't get a student out of it, it's a way that I have a tax-deductible way of supporting. It's the fact that my business card size logo is in that program. It's like, oh, that business supports this school theater program. Or, yeah.
It all comes back to how do we serve?
Say that again, Kristen, sorry.
It all comes back to how do we serve?
Mm-hmm. Well, and as far as specifically the discount question, again, you're the independent studio owner, and only you know the needs of your studio at a given moment, right? So if you feel like you need to offer a sliding scale for a period of time to attract people, then that's the way you should go. But I do think there is a fine line, isn't there, between, I always say to people, we're not Taco Bells. We don't, if you want to offer buy one, get one free, then that is your prerogative to do so. But I think you just have to think about it carefully.
Teachers, sorry to talk over you. I honor teachers who do trial lessons and that kind of thing. I will just say personally, I don't offer trial lessons. I feel like if someone is going to come take a lesson with me, they're going to pay for that lesson, pay for my time. And I also choose not to do just single lessons unless it's a specific audition coaching, and then I'll have someone schedule an hour and I'll charge them more. But if someone wants to just come try out a lesson or two, if they will commit to taking 6 lessons, which would be a half semester, then we're golden. But I just, at this point, this might be a seasons of life thing too. I don't have time for people that just want to just come and take a lesson and see if they like me. Because I don't feel like I can adequately teach. I can't teach someone to sing in one lesson. And if I'm spending that entire first lesson trying to make a good impression, you know, I don't choose to put myself in the position of doing job interviews constantly.
This is interesting. Lacey says that if any of her current students recruit a new student, even for one lesson, she gives them a free lesson, right? So again, that's an interesting idea. And Michelle is saying, yes, business plan, be intentional and have a reason and a desired outcome. So Michelle from Speak Easy is wonderful with business planning. And Lacey says, thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to know, we're getting a lot. People always wait till it's, you know, countdown to the top of the hour to come in with these wonderful questions. Kathleen Higgins, I love this. She's gotten many students by donating to a school auction. That's a lovely idea. And do you, Christine asks, do you suggest to specialize for marketing purposes on a specific singing style or offering multiple styles to reach a broader group of people?
Well, Seth Godin always says, find your smallest viable audience, find your niche. The danger is then that you get stuck in a niche when you might be good at doing a lot of different things. I think that it is fine to advertise as being able to do a lot of different things. I think perhaps what you want to emphasize instead is your studio reputation. Do you want to only work with semi-pros? Do you want to only work with a casual type of drop-in student? I think maybe rather than wondering what do I teach, what is the vibe of my studio? How do I present myself? How do I want my clients to feel?
And I think my approach is exactly just the opposite of that, in that I like teaching all ages and a variety of styles. So my marketing will say all levels, all ages, all styles. And then, of course, I'll pinpoint that. I'm not necessarily going to be the first person a rapper will come to, but yeah. But so I like that. I like that variety, and sometimes people they're so afraid that I'm just going to teach them opera or classical, and they'll say, well, do you teach, like, you know, popular music? It's like, oh yeah, and music theater, and yeah, if you want to sing a little pop, a little rock, and I don't tell them that maybe 6 months down the road I might sneak in a little Vaccai Italian one-page.
The horror.
I do think we must keep reminding NATS teachers, though, do not teach a style that you're not familiar with, that you haven't studied the anatomy, physiology, and acoustics of that style, that you haven't taken some lessons yourself to see what that feels like. There was a post on Facebook, and people were so kind to this person, and I was so glad for that, who said, you know, I have these students who want to teach belt. She was basically saying, how do I teach them belt, on a Facebook post? And people were very, very gracious and said, what I recommend is finding a teacher in your area and go take some lessons and begin to learn that voice production for yourself. So I do think that we cannot all specialize in absolutely everything. Now, that doesn't mean if you have an 8th grader who just wants to explore different sounds, you can explore that, but you still have to be limited in what your knowledge is. Are we in agreement about that?
Yeah, you can be someone who teaches a style. You can be someone who teaches singing.
Yes.
You know, one of my philosophies is, you know, I want to create good singers. I don't necessarily want to create good belters. I don't want to create I want good performers, but, you know, if you go at it from a foundational element of, when you come into my studio, what I want to do is teach you how to sing. If there's a specific style that you want to explore that I don't feel I have the strength to do, we're either going to figure it out together by finding somebody who can maybe Zoom into your lessons and help guide me in that. Sometimes I even just send students to another teacher and say, hey, why don't you spend a month and we'll go have you study with this other teacher in this style that you want to do. And then we sort of visit how that incorporates into the technique they already know. And it's just, we don't have to be an island. We can have a whole network, a whole community of teachers. I mean, my students are so much better for me having multiple teachers that I pull from than having had just me.
Yes, I agree. And I think the more confident we are in our own teaching, the more it allows us to collaborate.
Yeah.
I think that is so important. I love collaborating with teachers that I know and trust and getting their input. I always say I get so tired of my own thoughts, my own, I love that.
And I think the more you collaborate, the more you become more confident in your teaching. So,
yes.
They're mutually beneficial.
Yeah, it can reinforce our own thinking, can it? And go, okay, I am onto something here. Well, as I want to just go through one other area as we're wrapping up here, because I think this is important. We've got a couple questions around pricing, and also, and we'll talk about that. I just have to say, I keep hearing from my students about somebody through YouTube or something that's charging $600. He's 20-something with no degree, and right? I mean, we are definitely in a time of marketing changing everything, and I think we all just have to bite our tongue and stay in our lane. But even around here, I hear prices that people are charging, and I just think, my goodness. So to this question, how do you decide? I think you have to know your area, right? Know the marketing in your area. Be honest with yourself, where you are in your studies and business acumen and all of those things that go into teaching. I know Michelle would have something probably a little different to say about this possibly than I, because we should all be able to make a living, right? But I do think that there is a breadth of knowledge that helps determine what our pricing would be. Do you guys, what are your thoughts about how to set a price for your studio?
I say hire a business coach first.
And her name is Michelle.
Truly as teachers, we're very wrapped up in the emotional aspect of it, and that it's very hard to look at your studio and this thing that you love and these people that you value and say, okay, but first I'm a business, because I can't give you the lessons that I want to give you unless I'm making a living doing it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good to get some outside perspective. Mm-hmm. I really do. And then, going backwards, what do you need to make? What do you need to sustain a living in your area? My need is different than, mm-hmm. Somebody in California. My need is very different from yours being in Seattle. My cost of living here is quite small. But I also think there is a new rising in people who are pursuing private music lessons. And so that does make us more valuable.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful news, isn't it? I love hearing that.
I will say I actually heard this, Michelle actually, she is my coach. And when I first met her, I was really, really, really anxious over wanting to give people value and feeling really anxious around my pricing and being worried about ripping people off and wanting to be fair and can people afford me and this and that and the other. And she said, why are you making other people's finances your business? Who are you to do that? Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, okay. I need to do some soul searching around my money mindset, because if we are so consumed with, well, people can't afford me and this and that and the other, or I'm, I charge more than anybody else in my city. Who am I to do that? Blah, blah, blah. That says a lot about how we think about money. And I wonder if instead we could say, I'm going to price with confidence because I value my students and I value what I offer them. And I want to give them my best, and I want to serve them from a place of abundance. And I want them to invest in themselves. When we price high, then we have options. Then we can create scholarships. We can give generously to students who truly cannot afford us, but we know will work. We can find a way to serve them and make it happen. We can sew back into community arts programs. There's a lot of work that voice teachers need to do around money mindset, I think. Maybe I'm speaking just for myself, but I would invite us all to not be ashamed of pricing well and taking care of ourselves, because when we do that, we can operate from abundance and serve our students really well too, and our communities.
I feel like I used to felt like I had to justify why my pricing was higher than other teachers in town. And well, it's because I have all this experience and you know, I'm paying rent and I have all of this overhead. And now I just don't go there. My tuition cost is my tuition cost. And I really don't feel, I just stopped trying to justify it. And I'm transparent about it. If you go to so before someone contacts me for lessons, they already know what it's going to cost. So it's up to them, not me, to determine whether this is within their budget. So we can actually start the conversation with, do you have availability? And, you know, when can we start?
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Cynthia, as we close up here, this last comment I think is interesting. Why is 6 the number of lessons that you find works best for both you and the student to audition each other, in quotes? Does this help your retention?
It does help. It does help with retention. And I will say 6 because it's a half semester. And 12 weeks is a semester. And I can understand if someone is really like not done singing lessons before. Honestly, if they've never done singing lessons before and they're really kind of nervous about the whole thing, I don't know that I want to commit to spending 12 weeks with them. But I feel like 6 weeks gives us the first week just to get the hellos and how are yous and what do you sound like out of the way. And by about that, certainly by that 3rd week, we're really starting to make some progress. 4th week, 5th week, 6th week, they probably got a couple of pieces that they can perform. And at that point, either they've gotten what they came for, because the dabblers, they just want to try this, and then maybe they want to try calligraphy class, or maybe they want to take up crocheting or whatever it is. And so with some of those students, they'll do their 6 weeks and they're like, yay, I know how to sing. And then they'll go on to the next thing. But honestly, what happens in most cases, they'll do their 6 lessons and they're like, when can I sign up for more?
Wonderful. Well, we're getting lots of thank yous. I want to just answer one question that Kim has asked a couple times about Skype. And I will just say, Kim, if you watch, Cynthia and I did a whole NATS chat a year ago where we talked specifically about Skyping. So I welcome everyone to go to the NATS chat archives and watch previous chats, but you'll find that one specifically really helpful. Lots of thank yous coming in. And as always, I can't thank all the people that registered enough. And of course, my wonderful guest tonight. Thank you, ladies, for your insights. As business women and as voice teachers, we really have a remarkable field. I mean, the voice teacher community has evolved so drastically over the last 30 plus years that I've witnessed. And it's really amazing, I think, what the opportunities are now as voice teachers. So
I love what I do.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I want to remind our NATS registrants that the next NATS chat will be December 9th with Mary Saunders Barton. I hope you are all reading her and Norman Spivey's new book about cross-training. It will be wonderful. We'll be talking about belting and cross-training and all sorts of wonderful pieces of information from a dynamic voice teacher herself. And with that, I wish everyone good night. And we'll see you all in December. Thank you, ladies.
And thank you, Kari and Christin and Kelli.
Thank you. Good night. Close.